It began as a straightforward Craigslist sale. I needed to get rid of my old TV. A woman responded, and we agreed on a time for her to pick it up. But when she arrived, she wasn't alone. 5 men came with her, their expressions cold and unreadable. They pushed their way into my home, ignoring my attempts to stop them. They insisted on inspecting the TV, but their focus wasn't on the electronics, it was on me. The tension was thick in the air, and I could feel their eyes lingering on me, assessing, calculating. One of them suddenly stepped forward and, without a word, began urinating in my driveway. The others just stared, their eyes never leaving mine, as if daring me to react. My heart pounded in my chest, and all I could think about was getting them out of my house. I stammered an excuse, saying the sale was off, but they didn't move. It felt like hours before they finally turned to leave, but the look in their eyes promised that this wasn't over. That night, I sat in my darkened living room, every creak of the house making me jump. The next day, I installed extra locks on my doors, but it didn't help. I still felt their presence, like they were watching, waiting. I never sold anything on Craigslist again. I was thrilled to score a deal on a nearly new Keurig from Craigslist. The seller seemed eager to part with it, handing it over quickly in a deserted parking lot. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another Craigslist deal. For the first few days, it worked perfectly. Then, one morning, I noticed something strange. My coffee tasted bitter, more than usual, but I shrugged it off. Then I saw them, small, dark shapes crawling out from the machine's water reservoir. I froze in horror as dozens of cockroaches began pouring out, their bodies slick and shiny. They swarmed over my counter, disappearing into the cracks of my kitchen. My stomach turned as I realized I had been drinking from a machine that was infested with them. I trashed the Keurig immediately, but the damage was done. The cockroaches had found their way into my home. Every night, I could hear them scuttling behind the walls, their tiny legs scratching against the drywall. I couldn't sleep, knowing they were multiplying in the dark, waiting to emerge. It felt like my home was being taken over, inch by inch. I didn't think much of it when I sold my old juicer on Craigslist. The man who bought it seemed ordinary enough, just another buyer looking for a good deal. But then the emails started. At first, they were just friendly messages about juice recipes and cleaning tips. But then they got personal. He started mentioning things about my life, details I hadn't shared with anyone, things he couldn't possibly know. When I tried to ignore him, he escalated. I began finding packages on my doorstep, small items that seemed innocuous at first, a book, a kitchen gadget. But they were always things I had been looking at online or mentioned in passing. It was like he had access to my thoughts. I contacted the police, but without any direct threats, there was nothing they could do. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment, but the feeling of being watched never went away. I would catch glimpses of a figure out of the corner of my eye, always just beyond my vision. At night, I would lie awake, certain that he was out there, just waiting for the right moment to make his next move. We were trying to sell our house when the phone calls started. People were asking about renting the place, but we weren't renting it out. Puzzled, I did some digging online and found our house listed on Craigslist, complete with photos of our living room, our kitchen, even our children's bedrooms. The listing was disturbingly detailed, down to the slightly broken fence in the backyard that we hadn't gotten around to fixing. I contacted the person who posted the ad, and they responded with a long-winded story about being a missionary in Africa. But when I demanded they take the listing down, their tone changed. Suddenly, they were hostile. Soon after, we started receiving threatening messages, and then Craigslist blocked our email instead of theirs. People continued to show up at our door, ready to move in, and each time, I felt more and more like we were being invaded. We had to take the house off the market, install security cameras, and stay on high alert. It felt like someone had been in our home, walking through our rooms, learning about us. Every creak, every shadow in our house now felt like a threat, a reminder that someone out there had violated our sanctuary, and they could do it again. My TV had been acting up, and I found a repairman on Craigslist who offered to take a look for free. Desperate, I agreed. He arrived late, his clothes stained and smelling faintly of something metallic. He didn't say much as he began working, his eyes flicking around the room, taking in everything, my furniture, my photos, the layout of the house. After a while, he admitted he couldn't fix the TV, but he didn't leave. Instead, he started asking questions, personal ones. Where did I work? Did I live alone? His eyes lingered on the photos of my family on the wall, a small, unsettling smile playing on his lips. I told him it was time to go, but he just stood there, staring at me. I had to physically push him out the door, and even then, he hesitated, as if considering whether to come back inside. That night, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every noise in the house seemed amplified, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, the rustle of leaves outside. I was convinced I could hear footsteps on the stairs, the soft click of a door opening. But when I checked, no one was there. Or at least, no one I could see. I started sleeping with a weapon by my bed, but even that didn't make me feel safe. I sold my old washing machine to a man who seemed perfectly normal at first. He paid in cash, loaded it up, and drove away. But the next day, he called, furious. He claimed the machine was broken and demanded his money back. I knew it had worked when he bought it, so I refused. That's when the nightmare began. The voicemails started as angry rants, but soon they became something much darker. He would call at all hours, leaving messages filled with threats and promises of violence. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on my front door. When I checked, no one was there, but the door was covered in deep scratches, symbols etched into the paint that I didn't recognize. Then, one night, I was jolted awake by the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a rock through my living room window, and attached to it was a note, scrawled in red ink, "I know where you live." The police were no help, they said without any solid evidence. There wasn't much they could do. I was left to fend for myself, living in constant fear, wondering when he would come back, and what he would do next. The nights were the worst, every shadow a potential threat, every noise a sign that he was near.